Voracious Streams is the third full-length album from Turku, Finland-based death metal band Concrete Icon. When this band started out, they were focused more on something that was a further step away from the brutal death metal and thrash metal they were making. They were aiming for old-school death metal, and they ended up with something that was mid-paced and semi-melodic. A lot has changed since then, but their first two records were working towards a sound which was a varietal, somewhat old school, but generally a little bit melancholic and I would say slightly melodic in its intent. So they've moved beyond that by way of fully restaffing the band beyond their second record, and the only person remaining is Jake Peltonen, who is in Furious Descent and played in some other brutal death metal bands in the very distant past. This record is a step into something different, something that is decidedly much more aggressive. It is along the lines of something like Resurgency or Monstrosity, where it is riff after riff. It is brutal. It's up to that maybe early Deicide standard of immediate riff-focused stuff, and so we'll cut to a clip here and get right into that, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what makes this record special and why it was a little bit unexpected from this band. With a mostly new lineup for this record, there was a chance to do something completely different, and it makes it so some of the extant influences from Morbid Angel, Florida death metal, and some of the more brutal ideas out of, let's say, the Netherlands from Sinister and whatnot in the early to mid 90s feed into this record in a way that makes it very drum forward. And what I mean is the drums are very loud and brutal in the mix, and they definitely stand out for a reason, but it's also the core intensity of the music comes from that, and it makes it feel a lot more brutal than it is in some sense. There's not much else to say about it. It's just a death metal album that has that persistent 90s sound punching through it, and there's heavier grooves they're not really my thing. They're just a little bit too plain, a little bit too simple on some of the songs. They usually have somewhere to go with it that is more complex. They'll start from a simpler point and become more complex over the course of a song or two, which are built like that. To me, it feels very much influenced by 90s metal in general and not just death metal. That's only some of the songs on this record. Most all of them are very sharp. They're very punishing in the way that they present themselves, and overall it's a much more brutal than I'd expected from the band. I think overall the presentation is very fine here. The artwork is especially fine, and I think the overall I just enjoyed this record quite a bit. I love sitting with it. I think that the sound is a little bit off, and I think that's just part of the way the drums were produced and the way it was all mixed in the end, and I don't think that's a detriment for my taste. I think old school death metal and classic death metal and the stuff that lasts always has something about it that you could have tweaked but was left in there, and that becomes part of its character, part of its personality. Whether it's flawed in the eyes of right now has never mattered. If you go back and look at classic death metal, the more weird and different it was, the more it stands out now, and I don't know that this is especially weird or different as a death metal record, but it does stand out for all the choices made, and I think that it's something that I would grab off the shelf to listen to if I was looking for something that was brutal but old school, but not too brutal and stupid with it. So there's a nice mix of classic death metal and kind of what is cool about Finnish death metal right now, which is something which is a little bit more groove oriented and heavier in a different way. Check this out for yourself. It released on January 20th, and go ahead and read my review for more of my thoughts.